Bet the board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Fuhrman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast. NFL division previews continue. 5 divisions down, 3 to go. And we delve into arguably one of the more enigmatic and, well, interesting divisions in the entire NFL landscape on today's show. It's all about the NFC South. I am your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, the AFC South surprised me some. Digging into the NFC South, it feels like one team with legitimate postseason aspirations and 3 teams trying to figure out their identities.
I think the Saints are hoping they have postseason aspirations, so they're not throwing in the towel. But yes, this is not the most talented division. Let's put it that way.
Dennis Allen, the shortest odds to be the first coach fired, a coach near and dear to you. So let's see what the Saints can accomplish. But as we've done for all the...
I don't know how you arrived at that, but we'll go with it.
As we've done for all the previews thus far, we'll run through these in alphabetical order. And it just so happens the most intriguing team is at the top of the heap. Atlanta, a heavy favorite to win this division. That number has leaked out to minus $1.45, minus $1.50 amid some of their offseason acquisitions that just occurred in the last 7 to 10 days. We'll get to those. When you look at Atlanta's win total, 9.5, heavily shaded to the over. They're right around a $2 favorite to make the postseason, and it's a franchise that would love nothing more than to try and get into the postseason for the first time in an eternity. A change at head coach, a change at quarterback. Raheem Morris steps in after spending the last 3 seasons as the Rams' defensive coordinator. His second stint as a full-time head coach when he was with the Buccaneers from 2009 to 2011 was also the interim head coach in 2020 in Atlanta after the firing of Dan Quinn. When you look at what Raheem is able to accomplish with the Rams, they were top 15 or better in a lot of key defensive metrics. Personnel a little bit different here. This is a Falcons team whose issues last year were well chronicled on this very podcast. Lost 6 games by 1 score, consistently ran offense at the lowest rate of 11 personnel, and unraveled by inconsistent quarterback play. But Payne, the schedule sets up favorably for them. They'll play 6 of their first 9 games all at home. And it creates a little bit of optimism when you see a veteran quarterback entering the room in Kirk Cousins. May as well start on the offensive side of the ball with new OC Bijan Robinson taking over to try and bring this offense into the 21st century, something that was lacking more often than not under Arthur Smith's leadership last season.
Certainly the more exciting side of the football here.
How dare you disparage the acquisitions of Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons?
You know, Raheem and Bijan Robinson are coming over from the Rams, and it feels like they're trying to recreate the Matthew Stafford magic they had in L.A. by bringing in a veteran pocket passer with Kirk Cousins. I think the slight difference there, though, is Cousins is about 3 years older this season than when L.A. made the move for Stafford, and obviously Cousins is coming off the significant injury. But I think the goal here is clear, right? It's an increase accuracy. The Falcons QB room delivered the lowest rate of accurate throws in the league last season, which is mind-boggling knowing that Atlanta faced one of the 5 easiest schedules of past defenses. Cousins, if you look at him, led all qualifying QBs in adjusted accuracy at 81%. Kirk finished 3rd in completion rate over expectation. He gets the ball out quick, doesn't take sacks, so expect less negative plays for the Falcons offense. And you just think about Desmond Ridder and his mobility. Problem is he processed slow. And so 23% of pressures Ridder faced turned into sacks. You mentioned a little bit about Bijan Robinson's scheme. It's going to be a complete 180 from Arthur Smith's in that there will be more 3 wide receiver sets. Last year, the Rams offense only played without a 3rd receiver on the field 7% of snaps. The Falcons only used a 3rd receiver on 15% of snaps. It was the lowest in the NFL, 2nd lowest rate over the last decade. So you would expect the Falcons to pass more. The offensive line is a plus group, fifth most expensive in the NFL. And I think what's interesting, when I started digging into the data and trying to process it the right way, is if you look at run block win rate, Atlanta finished 28th. If you look at line yards created, 23rd. I think we've talked about this for a couple teams throughout the years, but when the entire world knows you're in a run formation and you're going to constantly run from the run formation on a running down, it takes kind of makes the offensive line's job tougher when they have more bodies to block. And so if you look at how each player performed in that exact situation, the unit graded out better than the metrics suggest. And so I would expect improvement from the Falcons O-line in terms of run blocking, and the staff is extremely excited about the O-line. They can't stop raving about them. If you look left to right, it's Jake Matthews, Matthew Bergeron, Drew Dahlman, Chris Lindstrom, and Caleb McGarry. There's 3 first-round picks in that group. The weak link was rookie Matthew Bergeron last year, who was learning a brand-new position at guard, so I would expect an uptick in his play, and that should elevate the room. Bijan Robinson, though, has to be better. Finished 20th in yards created, and Tyler Algier actually had a better rushing success rate. Zach Robinson's system, though, feels more like what Bijan ran at Texas, and you get excited seeing Kyron Williams' success in the Rams' offense, knowing Bijan is far more athletic and faster than Kyron. But I think this season will let us know exactly what Bijan is, and if Atlanta grossly overpaid taking him 8th overall. I think the positive here is we're projecting the Falcons to face a bottom 3 schedule of run defenses, so really no excuses for Bijan this season. The receiver group could have the most variance of any in the league. There's real talent, but I think the 2 questions are depth and Zach Robinson's ability to take Drake London and Kyle Pitts to the level we kind of envision for them when, you think about where they were drafted. If Zach Robinson is using 3 receiver sets, like, who the heck are the receivers past Drake London? Now,
don't you take shots at our beloved Darnell Mooney and the perennial underachiever while he was a member of the Bears?
Yeah, I mean, he'll figure it out. But I think, London probably has an opportunity here to emerge as one of the league's better receivers. And we'll see if he takes advantage of it, right? He's not a burner. He wins with his hands and physicality. If you look where he kind of dominated last season, there was a lot of ability over the middle of the field, and Kirk Cousins has no problem throwing it over the middle, whereas like last year, Art Smith didn't really want his quarterbacks throwing into traffic, which makes, complete sense. But Cousins doesn't mind it. 9.4 yards per attempt over the middle. That was London's best area last season. 13.7 yards per reception over the middle. That number was actually better than CeeDee Lamb and Puka and Tyreek. Kyle Pitts is the guy everyone's projecting for a career resurgence at tight end, just based upon the scheme and the quarterback fit. Cousins targeted his tight ends last season at the 5th highest rate of any quarterback. Jonnu Smith is in Miami now. Pitt's target share was 17% last season. Cousins targets his tight ends last year at a 27% clip. So you would expect greater usage there for Pitts. But, kind of getting back to the other guys, we saw Atlanta's projected slot receiver Rondale Moore tore his ACL this week. So right now it's Ray McLeod seems to kind of be the leader in that clubhouse. Darnell Mooney, who you mentioned was the splash offensive signing. I thought the contract was horrific, but he's a talented guy, right? He runs 4.3. Atlanta is, in my mind, paying for the player they envision him to be and not what he's been in Chicago. And I think that's fair to a degree, right? We're all trying to this is a market, right? So there is some opinion in that. And so,
with a contract,
you look at Mooney,
with a contract like that, who are the Falcons bidding against paying that kind of money? Do you think that the market was offering, that he had a number of spots to choose from?
Well, yes. I mean, it's a market, right? They're not just saying, "Hey, we're gonna give you this ridiculous number," and everyone else is offering you $4. But I get the vibe, right? When you look at him, he's got this elite trait with speed, and you think about that fit in Chicago, and it's like he had inaccurate quarterbacks, right, in horrific offenses, and he played in a lot of poor weather games in that division. So you're like Justin Fields, right? It's Trubisky, it's Tyson Badgett, it's Nathan Peterman, it's Chase Daniel, it's Mike Glennon. I think Trevor Siemian was in the mix there. You had the out of his prime Andy Dalton. Those are the quarterbacks that Mooney played with, and so it makes it difficult to assess when you're playing games in Chicago's weather, in Green Bay's weather, and so I think you get them on that carpet indoors, and you're thinking, hey, right, we're going to get a lot out of this guy. I, though, would consider taking a look at like Hunter Renfrow in the receiver room. I could see him and Cousins having a nice rapport and getting him mixed into that slot role with Ray McLeod now that Rondale Moore went down. I think the real positive here, Todd, right? Atlanta faces a schedule of defenses projected to be bottom 3 in the league this year. And when you're breaking in a new head coach, an OC, a quarterback, it helps catching a break in schedule when you're making that transition. Early on, this might not look great. We've seen veteran quarterbacks struggle out of the chute with their new teams. I mean, Tom Brady wasn't great early on in Tampa Bay. Everyone thought the world was coming to an end, and I think that first game that he played in New Orleans. The toughest part of Atlanta's schedule is early, right? It's the Steelers' defense, it's the Eagles and Chiefs, followed by Dennis Allen and Todd Bowles' defenses. But Atlanta has a chance to be average against a below-average schedule in totality, and I think flirt with the playoffs.
When you look at this Falcons team defensively, I think amid some of the consternation and frustration watching this team week in, week out last year with Taylor Heineke or Desmond Ridder under center, the defense actually gave them a puncher's chance more often than not. And when you look at some of the numbers, this was a group that finished 3rd in the NFL in third downs, 4th in the NFL in red zone defense, just 25th in pressure rate, and we knew that they needed to address how they were going to drive a bit of a pass rush. It's what prompted the move to trade for Matthew Judon with that 3rd pick. End of the year, 4th in run defense, 6th in total defensive efficiency, 10th in early down success rate. Weren't able to generate takeaways, though, which hurt quite a bit. So a lot of a mixed bag. In comes a defensive-minded head coach. Do you see the personnel for them to buy into what Raheem Morris wants to sell and take another step forward in 2024?
You smartly pointed out Thursday during the Jags deep dive where, Ryan Nielsen improved Atlanta's defense last season, and you mentioned it there again. The Falcons were top 3 in both third down and red zone defense. So situationally, very good. Those areas have more fluctuation year over year. The key areas, though, I felt like Atlanta struggled some. They were 14th in yards per rush allowed before first contact, and it seemed solid, but it was against the second easiest schedule of run offenses. And when you adjust for quarterback and offense, Atlanta was 30th defending the pass. There are 2 positives, right? That Raheem Morris showed with premium talent, he could lead a top 5 defense like he did in LA in 2021. And then the Rams defenses were gutted with a lot of the contracts that they pushed to win that Super Bowl, and they got their Super Bowl. So it was mission accomplished, but there was a lot of salary cap problems, and I thought some of Raheem's defenses performed better than expectation with some of the talent he had there in the latter stages. So, you look at who he brought in, right? Our boy Jimmy Lake to be the DC. There's going to be a transition back to a 3-4 base. The transition, though, comes against a schedule of offenses projected to be bottom 5 in the NFL. So it has a chance to, again, look a little bit better than it actually is. And I think if we evaluated Atlanta a week ago, we'd say this is one of the least talented defenses in the NFL. And it's still not great, but Atlanta completes the trade for Matthew Judon last Friday, and then they inked Justin Simmons on the same day. So, there is more talent there. The front, I think, is where the questions are, and it's mostly with outside pass rush stuff. Inside, Grady Jarrett is the horse. I look at him, though, the play's declined a little bit the last 3 seasons. He's gone from, elite to good, and then he tore his ACL week 8 last season, so he's recovering from that. If he's 100%, there's probably less concern up front. Our man crush, David Onyemata, continues producing, but he's going to be 32, so we'll see what that looks like. But he's an elite run defender last season, had a pressure rate on 10% of pass rush snaps. Rook was a second-round pick out of Clemson and probably learns a thing or two from the 2 vets inside. I like the interior of the line if everyone's healthy, right? Then you look at the depth. It's Eddie Goldman, who's a veteran piece, played 5 great seasons from 2015 to 2019, then decided he didn't want to play football again. And I think he's made 2 retirements, but he's back. So the interior is I think better than people are projecting. And then Judon, again, it was a good trade. Last year, his peers voted him a top 35 player. He did tear his bicep in week 4. But his last 2 healthy seasons in New England, a 15% pressure rate on pass rush snaps and 31 sacks. I would have really liked to have seen Judon paired with, the rookie Braylon Trice, but Trice tore his ACL last week. I think that is a pretty big blow. I thought Trice was far better than his draft position, 17% pressure rate on pass rush snaps at Washington the last 2 seasons. So I think that is a decent-sized loss. Lorenzo Carter, is now your number 2 defensive end. He's a replacement level guy. I think he's better setting the edge than getting upfield. Zach Harrison was a 3rd-round rookie last year who played to a replacement level, which I thought was pretty good. Apparently, he's had a nice offseason. So, if Harrison takes another step, we probably think differently of this group. And then you have, Arnold, who's, showed last year he made that year 3 leap, and he's going to project to start a little bit. He was a 2nd-round pick in 2022. The snaps were a touch limited. The pressure numbers did decrease, but 16% pressure on pass rush snaps with 7 sacks. That's pretty good. Linebacker group is a little interesting, right? Caden Ellis is kind of the horse there. He made a huge leap in 2022. And then, if you look, sustained efficiency basically over 1,000 snaps for Atlanta last year, where, it wasn't that prior to his arrival. So the 1,000 snaps is a great sample size in a singular year. And he was, top 10 in run stuffs, only missed 7% of tackles, 5.2 yards per target allowed in coverage. But I think maybe, what he was prior, and then you wonder, what's next to him? Troy Anderson, he's kind of been unplayable over 620 snaps in 2 seasons. 2nd-round pick, he's only 25, so probably, has the ability to improve. But I think if Anderson doesn't make that leap, there's a massive hole at linebacker for Atlanta. The secondary has talent. It just needs to be more consistent individually. And I think, there's a lot of mixed and matched pieces there that are trying to kind of build cohesion. A.J. Terrell is a guy that, you were either really all in on or you were out on when he was drafted where he was. Fantastic 21 and 23 seasons, polar opposite in 2020 and 2022. So you're wondering, which player is Atlanta getting this year? Jesse Bates proved to be an elite safety, signed for big money last year. He played like the best safety in the league, right? Him and Winfield Jr. basically. 10 havoc plays created through the air, forced 3 fumbles, graded out fantastic in coverage, single-digit missed tackle rate. And then you mentioned Justin Simmons is going to now be Bates' running mate at safety. He's had 8 straight seasons of really good ball. And then it looks like D. Alford and Clark Phillips are battling inside for the slot job. I think Alford provides a nice floor. Phillips certainly the higher ceiling, and he's had a great camp so far. Mike Hughes is probably the concern in the secondary. If you remove his lone good season in Kansas City working with a defensive wizard, Hughes has given up 8.2 yards per target over his career, and then God forbid A.J. Terrell goes down. What are you doing at corner? So I'd feel much better about the Falcons' defense if Trice didn't go down. Maybe there was a veteran linebacker added on the cheap, maybe another body at corner. But again, the schedule of offenses is weak. Raheem is solid. I think you're hoping Atlanta finishes somewhere around, the middle of the pack in schedule adjusted efficiency defensively, and that'd be a really solid season. There's been 2 viewpoints here, Todd, on Atlanta, where early this offseason we saw over 8.5 get buried. It's why we're out to 9.5. And then when it looked like Atlanta had reached its peak in market, there was a sell at almost $2 to miss the playoffs. So, again, we kind of joke around about professional bettors not huddling around the campfire together, right? There is sometimes a little bit of a battle, and even though those are 2 different markets, we've seen a battle from pro bettors on Atlanta.
Sometimes it'd be a lot easier if they did huddle around the campfire and all pulled in the same direction, coordinated moves accordingly, and made for a greater level of community interest and sharing of information. But alas, that's not the world we live in.
The difference is, right, though, both effectively getting best market prices. right? And that's the key if you want to do this at a professional
100%. Get the best of the number, take your shot, and more often than not, if you're betting on Atlanta to miss the playoffs, it's not going to happen 50% of the time. That's why it's priced the way it is, and you hope that when you're looking at those implied probabilities, you find yourself on the right side of the ledger. From the Falcons, who have aspirations of winning the division and getting to the postseason, to a Carolina team that just wants to look competent after putting together a 2-win campaign last year. You look at the Panthers' season-long numbers here. Their win total sits at 5.5, slightly shaded to the over. They are long shots to make the postseason, north of 5-1. If you believe that they can go from worst to first, their price has now drifted out to 11-1 to win the NFC South. And as far as some of their personnel changes, we can start at the top. They bring in a new head coach in Dave Canales. As far as additions, Deontay Johnson at the skill position, supposed to be the most impactful. They addressed their offensive line that was a major concern, bringing in Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis. Hunt on a massive deal. Defensively, a couple of familiar former South Carolina Gamecocks in Jadeveon Clowney, DJ Wanham. Josie Jewell, a little bit of a tackling machine, although you look at his underlying numbers, they left a lot to be desired during his time in Denver. Jordan Fuller and Dane Jackson. Gone are players like Brian Burns, Yator Gross-Matos, Jeremy Chin, and a couple of others. Payne, this is a franchise that hasn't made the postseason since 2017, and they actually own the NFL's worst record since 2019 at a robust 24-59. This is a franchise that's looked rudderless in a variety of fronts, and you can understand when you have your 7th new head coach over the last 6 seasons, becoming the first team in NFL history to do so in a 6-season span when you include some of the interims. Offensively, I think every Panthers fan is hoping for the best. A balanced attack where Bryce Young can take the steps from a rookie quarterback that looked like a fish out of water into being capable and comfortable in the pocket. What are some of your expectations with Canales taking over, who has been known to run the ball stubbornly into loaded boxes, even with minimal efficiency, given what Carolina has at hand from a running back position, wide receiver, and, of course, their young quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, there's not really a need to rehash what transpired last year, and it'll probably give Carolina fans another nightmare to relive. But I think, we understood QB play and the offense were both historically abysmal. You mentioned Dave Canales. I mean, the reason he was brought in, right, is to give this Panthers offense a little jolt, give Bryce Young a fighting chance. And, what Canales has done the last 2 seasons in Seattle and Tampa with Geno and Baker Mayfield is what landed him this job, right, flat out. And I think Dave Tepper basically said as much. And, Geno Smith in 2022 went from a career backup to leading the league in completion rate in Dave Canales' offense. And then he was second in completion rate over expectation. Leaves for Tampa last season, and Geno's play dips a little bit, right? And Baker Mayfield has a career year. Baker finished 13th out of 49 qualifiers in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation. Now, there's a lot of luck for Baker, but, when you're making these hires, nobody knows for sure, right? That's no surprise. You just kind of stack data points and follow breadcrumbs to make the most informed decisions. And so, what's interesting here is Dave Canales is going to report directly to the owner, David Tepper, right? And he's also calling the offensive plays on the field as well. So he's shouldering the full load here. So you wonder what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. But if you've followed Canales over the years, he's impressive. And despite those ridiculously high run rates, he's kind of analytically sound when he talks about it. He's actually willing to communicate with the media and sometimes over-communicate, I think. I know everyone wants like this emphatic stance on Bryce Young from me because, it's kind of what I do with a lot of these quarterbacks, but it's probably not fair at this point. Yes, like the stable metrics last season were horrific, and history shows not many rookie QBs with those stable metrics go on to be anything in this league. And we know what the issues are, right? I mean, the physical size is lacking. The hand size isn't great. The arm talent isn't elite. But I'm not really ready to close the book on Bryce Young because I think the football acumen meshes pretty well with Dave Canales. And, we all have access to camp reports. And, I wouldn't say they're the same, but we all have some level of access. And what I'm hearing is it's been a little uneven from Bryce in camp. But this past week, he had a monster day against the Jets on Thursday. So it seems like there's some progression there. And then I think the positive here, again, it's something we talk about in this division because they all play one another, right? But the schedule of defenses for Bryce and the Panthers offense projects to be bottom 5. It's one of the NFL's largest dips in schedule strength comes on the ground. And so Carolina faced the second toughest schedule of run defenses last season. It's projected to be bottom 10 this season. And, when we think about this with Canales liking to run, that helps, right? Less pressure on Bryce is a positive if the ground game is efficient. And then the talent around Bryce has been upgraded. And you mentioned up front some of those signings. Carolina went and added Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis at guard. Canales wants to run the ball, and Carolina was 30th in run block win rate last year, 30th in line yards created. Robert Hunt is not worth what he was paid, but he is a massive upgrade, one of the 10 best run blocking guards last season. Damian Lewis, not worth the money, not even close, right? But if he returns to the 2022 form in Seattle when he was working with Canales, right, Lewis is an upgrade. Taylor Moton is a guy that we talk about every single year as being one of the more underappreciated tackles. The guy's given up 15 sacks on nearly 4,100 career pass block snaps, and he's playing with chaos around him because the offensive lines have been dog shit, and he's, overcompensating for probably some lackluster guys next to him. Moton finished 10th in pass block win rate among qualifying tackles last season. Austin Corbett, moving to center, had a down 2023. If he bounces back and plays like he did from 2020 to 2022, massive upgrade, and I don't think there's a reason he can't. He's 28. He's in his prime. And then you have Ekwonu, was the 6th pick in 2022. He's had back-to-back seasons of above replacement level ball. You're hoping that he can find that new elevated ceiling in year 3, which, when you take a guy 6th overall, you're hoping to kind of capture the peak of his play and not just get an average guy. And Carolina's just, all told, spent a ton of resources along the offensive line in free agency in the draft. It's the most expensive offensive line in the NFL. So there really are no excuses there for Bryce in terms of protection. The weapons are better than last season. You mentioned the trade for Deontay Johnson. I don't know if Johnson's a true number 1 receiver. He's probably not, but is he like a 1B? Probably, and I think he's got a better chance to produce in an offense not run by Matt Canada in a division where, again, there's also weather playing in Baltimore and Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, right? And Canales has talked about moving Johnson around the formation to keep defenses from focusing on him, which is, somewhat of a positive. We saw that with Chris Godwin last year where he got moved around a bunch. I did notice that the Johnson's dealing with a little bit of a groin strain, so let's monitor that. Adam Thielen provides a decent floor, finished top 10 in total route wins, but a bit of an accumulator last season. And then I think the question becomes like the ceiling. What are the kids going to provide? And we saw Carolina move up to draft Xavier Leggett at 32 in April's draft.
Aggressive.
He is the definition of a one-year wonder. His first 4 seasons at South Carolina, he averaged 0.67 yards per route run. Last season, it balloons to 3.2 with South Carolina playing from behind and an NFL quarterback throwing to him. The route tree isn't robust quite yet for Leggett, but he's a good kid. He's a worker. He's got some elite traits. Let's just see if it transitions. I don't know if it will completely out of the gate, right? The consistency probably not going to be there, but hopefully he can hit a couple splash plays. Jonathan Mingo was picked 40 in 2023. Kind of a similar story, was never dominant in college, right? His senior season was the 1 year he flashed, and it wasn't even at the elite level of Leggett's 1 year wonder, right? Terrace Marshall was picked 59 in 2021. Prior to the start of camp, Marshall was being discussed as a cut candidate, but he's had a good camp. He balled out during the Jets scrimmage last week when a couple of receivers were down, like Deontay Johnson. The other 2 young kids on offense are running back Jonathan Brooks. He's recovering from an ACL tear. If you've heard that plan, it's to kind of bring him back slowly. Jatavian Sanders at tight end has flashed in camp. I don't think it'll be immediate, but leapfrogging guys like Ian Thomas and Tommy Tremble isn't inconceivable at some point during Sanders' rookie season. Neither has played above replacement level in their 9 combined seasons in Carolina. So, I'm as interested as everyone else to see what this looks like. But you think about this, Todd, right? 4.1 yards per play last season. It was the lowest amount of any offense in the NFL the last 16 seasons.
And it didn't even feel like that when you watched them on a week-in, week-out basis. It felt like 2.1 yards per play.
You know, I mean, you just think about that, right? You walk to the mailbox to grab the mail. It's like, oh, you know, that was like 9 plays for Carolina's offense.
Well,
you know,
that's over
Young,
3 drives as well, Payne, to see Carolina's offense on the field for 9 plays.
And then, you know, like Bryce Young's play, it kind of mirrored rookie levels of like Josh Rosen and Deshaun Kaiser. And so that can only improve in year 2. The schedule of defenses is bottom 5 this year. We know offense equates to winning at like a 3.5x rate over defense in the year 2024. And so those are some of the reasons pro bettors earlier this offseason elected to go over a real low bar of 4.5 wins and why we're out to 5.5 as we discuss the Panthers now.
Real quick, on the defensive side of the ball, a familiar name, defensive coordinator Elijah Evero will be tasked with trying to create a little bit more havoc from a stop unit. The Panthers were last in the NFL last season with 11 takeaways after finishing near the bottom of the league in that category in 2021 and 2022 as well. It, of course, doesn't help when that you're never playing with a fourth quarter lead, that you don't have a chance to allow your pass rushers to pin your ears back and try and force some of those turnovers. I mean, Derek Brown has been outstanding in terms of occupying space in the middle of that interior, a guy who probably doesn't get enough credit for a defense that's been playing from behind. We mentioned at the top 2 former South Carolina products that are brought in Jadeveon Clowney and DJ Wanham. It's a back 4 where it's an interesting group, but you're not quite sure what you're going to get from them. Of course, this group, in my opinion, will be headlined by J.C. Horn if he can stay healthy. And the more I talk about this, Payne, it's amazing. It feels like all we have is a pipeline of South Carolina Gamecocks from Columbia right up to Charlotte, a little bit different than the Philadelphia Eagles, who try and build with an elite SEC program, trying to draft players out of Georgia instead.
I do love it. College football starts this week, so you're getting in some college jabs there. I love it. I'm concerned about the Panthers defense, right? You kind of hit all of the overarching points that there's not a lot of high-end talent or depth here. And then the defensive coordinator, Evero, he was retained, but so far in his 2 seasons running a defense, one in Denver and last year in Carolina, appears to be in over his head a touch, right? I mean, the 2022 Broncos defense finished 30th in schedule-adjusted efficiency. And if you remember, there were some games where they quit on Evero. And then last year, the Panthers finished 30th in schedule-adjusted defense. You mentioned the defensive line. That was where there was some movement this offseason. There are some questions after trading Brian Burns to the Giants. Derek Brown, you hit perfectly, is the bright spot. I mean, he is a dominant run defender, finished number 1 in run stop win rate and run stuffs, 20th in pass rush win rate among defensive tackles. Carolina brought in the mercenary, otherwise known as Jadeveon Clowney, to replace Burns. And I think theoretically, I love the move, right, in both the short and long term. Short term, Clowney replaces Burns' production this season, and actually, you know, last year is better than Burns. And I think Burns is good, but not elite. Long-term, Burns is off the books, plus Carolina gets draft capital back. And so, you know, you look at Clowney last year, finished 5th in pass rush win rate, 71 pressures, 10 sacks, but the Ravens were a Super Bowl contender. The goal for Carolina is to stay out of the NFC South cellar. So let's see if some of those injuries pop up and, you know, how many games Clowney's actually going to play this season. That will be interesting. But I do think if you got a 100% Burns versus a 100% Clowney and then also factored in financials and draft capital, like this is a no-brainer trade-off here for Carolina. So don't let anybody tell you I'm an FSU homer. DJ Wanham, who you mentioned, signed in free agency. You know, he's a below replacement level player all 4 seasons in Minnesota, only an 8% pressure rate on pass rush snaps for his career. Past Derek Brown inside. Shy Tuttle and Bijan Robinson, 2 vets. Tuttle was an undrafted guy in 2019. He's been below replacement level the last 2 seasons. Robinson struggled with the Giants last year, despite playing alongside some monsters there. His play is just very inconsistent year to year. Which guy are you getting? Linebacker group loses the horse, and Frankie Luvo, we talked about him in depth during our Commanders preview. Shaq Thompson, solid linebacker, but not elite, and he's returning from a fractured fibula. You mentioned Josie Jewell signs in free agency. He's a scheme fit because he was in Denver with Evero. Solid tackler, 7% missed tackle rate over his 6-year career, tends to struggle in coverage, 8.4 yards per target allowed the last 2 seasons. And then it's Trevin Waltz, the 3rd-round rookie out of Kentucky. Now, he's flashed in camp, and he's going to get some snaps this season. But, you need the first 2 guys probably to stay healthy. And then you mentioned the secondary. It's been a concern in camp to where beat writers were actually banging the table for GM Dan Morgan to sign Stephon Gilmore. It's too late. Gilmore just inked with Minnesota yesterday.
Would have been another Gamecock.
Yep. J.C. Horn needs to be a shutdown guy, and he's only given up 5.9 yards per target over 3 seasons, but he's also only played 22 games in those 3 seasons. So to your point, availability is Horn's greatest ability this season for Carolina's defense. Dane Jackson was slotted to be Horn's running mate at the other outside corner spot. He suffered a significant hamstring injury last week that's going to keep him out at least 6 weeks. Starting safety Xavier Woods suffered a groin injury last week. Canales came out and said Woods' injury was more serious than initially thought. Could miss the start of the season. Panthers did sign safety Jordan Fuller. He's also a scheme fit. He played with Evero in L.A. Inconsistent 4 seasons in the league. If Fuller gets back to the 2021 form, it's a worthwhile signing. Similar situation with slot corner Troy Hill, who was in L.A. with Evero. Replacement level corner. There's not much depth to speak of. So again, the schedule is positive. Carolina played a top 5 slate of offenses last season, projected to be bottom 10 this season, so that's a nice little breath of fresh air for Evero. But if Horn goes down, right, and you're starting the season, without Dane Jackson and potentially Xavier Woods, you can see why the beat writers covering the team every day were banging the table to sign some help back there.
Modest improvement. I think that's a realistic expectation for Carolina. You want to see Bryce Young continue to develop and feel like Dave Canales will have this organization headed in the right direction, given a lot of the instability that has been synonymous with the way things have operated in Charlotte, from the front office to the head coaching box as well. Want to encourage all of you, our loyal Bet the Board listeners, to follow Payne on X at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there as well. Most importantly, be sure to follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And if you haven't already done so, sign up for the Bet the Board podcast newsletter. A couple editions already in your inbox. It arrives fresh each and every Friday throughout the course of football season. And I know a lot of you have said you've signed up, you haven't received it. So the best way to try and go about addressing that, mark the email address below as a safe sender from bettheboardpodcast@gmail.com or info@bettheboardpodcast.com. That'll be the best, most effective way to make sure that these newsletters that are worth their weight in gold don't end up in spam on a weekly basis. And also be sure to share this newsletter and forward it along. Get other people to sign up, your friends, your family, and your coworkers. It's a great way to show support as we can continue to circulate the gospel that is all things Bet the Board throughout the course of football season. On to the other 2 teams in the division, Payne, with the New Orleans Saints, whose win total sits at 7.5, slightly shaded to the over. They are, of course, underdogs as well to make the playoffs at a price tag right around that plus $1.75 threshold. And if you believe that this team can win its division, that number has been drifting out north of $4 as we currently sit. As far as personnel is concerned in New Orleans, they make additions on the defensive side. Chase Young, the most notable signing, arguably, to come in and help solidify that pass rush. You bring in a Super Bowl champion in Willie Gay to anchor that linebacking core. Drafting a player like Taliesin Fuaga to try and bolster the building blocks in front of Derek Carr and Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama. Gone are Jameis Winston, Michael Thomas, and oft-injured Andrews Pete. When we look at New Orleans in general, this coaching staff heavily invested in Derek Carr for at least the next 2 seasons, due gigantic dead cap numbers over the 24-25 campaign, a combined $112 million. And that coaching staff, as we mentioned at the top of the show, needs to deliver, as Dennis Allen has yet to make the playoffs as a head coach and has only 1 winning season on his resume. Offensively, Payne, Clint Kubiak comes over from San Francisco, taking over the offensive coordinator role vacated by Pete Carmichael. And when you look at the way things have gone in New Orleans, it's been either Sean Payton or Carmichael calling offensive plays going all the way back to 2006. So a little bit of a change in philosophy. Derek Carr finished with a bit of a flourish last year, got this offense headed in the right direction. Didn't get much help from the running back room. Receiver-wise, it seems to be Chris Olave and everybody else, and the offensive line remains a guess in terms of what we're going to get. When you're assessing the Saints offense, where do you find some of their strengths and weaknesses going into the season?
Well, I think the first strength or positive is Clint Kubiak, the new Saints OC. Spent a year in San Francisco, and typically our coordinator projections are higher when they come from specific coaching trees, and the Kyle Shanahan tree would be one of those. And there is some history here, right? So we have data. Kubiak ran the Vikings offense in 2021, took Minnesota to a top 10 ranking in schedule-adjusted pass efficiency. It was an above-average offense in totality, and it was under a defensive-minded coach like he has now in Dennis Allen. So I think Kubiak projects to be an upgrade over Pete Carmichael. And you just look at what Pete did last year. None of the little things to help an offense that, to me, we talk about all the time. I have two schmoes from their home office are talking about these things. It should be, easy for a guy making millions of dollars calling plays. But
well, there's a chance you watch more tape than some of the coordinators, given the adjustments that they're ill-equipped to make on a week-in, week-out basis in the league.
Out of 45 qualifying quarterbacks, Derek Carr threw with play action at the 44th highest rate. And it's not like Derek Carr is an elite quarterback that doesn't need help, right? And then Pete used pre-snap motion at the second lowest rate. Overarching the positive here, again, it's the theme of this show, New Orleans schedule. Projects to be one of the 3 easiest schedules of defenses. Derek Carr specifically projects to face a bottom 5 schedule of passing defenses. And there's some interesting elements to his play last season where you'd potentially call for positive regression. If you look on early downs the first 3 quarters, Derek Carr was 9th in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation. Late downs all quarters, Derek Carr was 31st. Typically, late downs have larger swings year to year. Upgrade in OC should help. We saw positive strides made with Derek Carr in the Saints' red zone offense from Week 8 onward, increasing their touchdown rate by 27%. Taysom Hill was used more. I don't know if we talked about it at the start of the podcast or maybe off air, but not a bad idea trying to get value from a versatile bowling ball like Taysom Hill, who the Saints have paid $43 million to the last 6 seasons. I think we're maybe a touch higher on the Saints' weapons than other forward-facing projections have them out there, basically like a bottom 7-8 in the league pass-catching group. Chris Olave averaged 2.1 yards per route run. That was higher than the 1.4 expectation. Rashid Shaheed's everyone's breakout candidate this season, deep ball threat, 10th in average target distance, 16 plays of 15-plus yards, but let's keep an eye on Shaheed. He's dealing with a toe and foot issue. You don't love seeing that early in the season for a receiver needing to make sharp cuts on a dime. If Shaheed or Olave miss any time, this will indeed be like a bottom 8 pass-catching group because there's questions about the depth. There has been positive chatter around A.T. Perry, though, this offseason.
That's your guy, buddy.
If you look, well, when you watch some of the ACC, right, you can kind of tell who has the potential at the next level based upon the gap in the conference. So when you get players, on a Wake Forest, for instance, torching guys on a Clemson or an FSU, right? And so it's like, he played better against good competition. It makes it obvious to tell. If you look last year down the stretch, Perry caught 12 of 18 targets for nearly 21 a pop with 4 touchdowns. There are some underlying metrics that are a little bit concerning, but I believe it was like a 5th-round pick. So, we're not, if he doesn't materialize, it's not like a huge deal. What's coming from Derek Carr, and I don't know if you've seen this, is that him and the receivers are on the same page right now. And Carr claims the chemistry is 10 times further ahead at this point than it was last season. And we can kind of all remember the embarrassing primetime games where Carr and his receivers weren't on the same page, and he's animated on the field, yelling and pointing like a buffoon. Hopefully there's less of that, and it sounds like that is the case. The glaring weakness, though, of the Saints is the offensive line and the run game. This has the potential to be a bottom 5 offensive line now that Ryan Ramczyk is out for the season. He was far and away the Saints' best offensive lineman. Trevor Penning is going to fill that role. He's played 500 snaps in 2 seasons as the 19th overall pick, right? That tells you Penning's not good enough to get on the field unless it's out of necessity. He's allowed an 8% pressure rate on pass block snaps. Maybe the move to right tackle gets him to replacement level. Either way, it's a massive dip from Ramczyk. And then you have Talise Fuaga taken with the 14th pick. Monster for 3 seasons at Oregon State, but he played right tackle. And so now the Saints are asking him to play left tackle, and he's dealing with a back injury. Eric McCoy at center is coming off his best season as a pro. Is that the new norm after 5 seasons, or does he dip back to replacement level like the prior 2 years? And then you have Cesar Ruiz. Could be as large of a bust as Penning to this point. He's just easier to hide inside. 4 straight seasons of below replacement level play. Lucas Patrick comes in, I believe, from Chicago. He's slotted at left guard. He brings nice position versatility, right? He can play either guard spot. He can snap it. That adaptability is why he's still in the league, but he's been a below replacement level player for 7 seasons. So, I don't love the offensive line, that's for sure. Running backs have to be better. I don't know if they're going to be, right? The New Orleans O-line was actually above average last season, moving bodies. They were 9th in line yards created, 15th in run block win rate. But the Saints backs didn't record a 20-plus yard run all season. They finished dead last in yards per rush after first contact. Alvin Kamara finished 56th out of 72 qualifiers in yards created. Jamal Williams, 71st. We hated that signing. He was basically like a back that was efficient in short yardage and around the goal line.
He's
never been
for
good.
A dude just because he had a boatload of touchdowns behind the best offensive line in the league.
Yep, bang on. And so there was this hope that 3rd-round pick Kendre Miller would step up and take this job. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury, and there's a quote from Dennis Allen regarding Miller. It's challenging and hasn't gotten easier for the back to make the team without practicing. Now, I would find it extremely hard to believe a 2023 3rd-round pick gets cut before the 2024 season. But let's see. And I think why that's important is New Orleans gets something, right, from their ground game this season. If you look, the Saints go from a top 5 schedule of run defenses faced last season, projected to be bottom 5 this season. It's one of the largest dips of any offense in the league. So it's like, hopefully there's that provides some hope. That provides some enhanced efficiency going against a weaker schedule. And I think, you kind of wrap this up, like Derek Carr is what he is at this point. The offensive line isn't good. Kamara's regressed the last 5 seasons, but it's hard to, I think, identify for, I don't want to say casual fans, but maybe casual fans, right? Because 75 dump-offs last season helped retain his fantasy value. But as a runner...
you nailed it. Talking about people looking at your productivity based on fantasy production, and especially in PPR leagues, it's tough to try and see how inefficient he really was.
Yeah, I mean, he's no longer elusive. 5 straight seasons of dip in his elusive rating. And then Dennis Allen, provides 0 value to this team aside from being a defensive coordinator with a head coach title. So it's hard to want to back New Orleans, but the market also understands this and could be discounting the Saints a fraction too much, maybe, is kind of where I'm thinking about this. And when you talk Dennis Allen, it's certainly all about defense.
When you mention Kamara, too, just to highlight some of the concerns you have from 8 week going forward, from week 8 last year, ranked 41st in explosive run rate, 39th in yards per carry, and 37th in yards after first contact. Ended the season with 180 carries, and his longest rushing attempt was 17 yards, far from an elite level back that we grew accustomed to your point, that when he got the ball in the backfield, you knew it was must-see TV because he could turn it into a home run. Now, defensively, Payne, for Joe Woods and what he brings back, I mean, if we want to start with the positive, this was a group that was top 5 in 3rd down conversion percentage against. We know that can be a very volatile number year over year, 4th in takeaways and top 10 in points per game allowed. There are some pieces to like along the defensive line. Maybe the linebacking room gets better, or it should get better with Willie Gay. DeMario Davis continues to produce in an advanced age. And when you look at the secondary, there's a lot of reason for optimism there. Although one thing to keep in mind that came out of yesterday's game against the 49ers, Kool-Aid McKinstry was expected to play a prominent role, has a knee injury. The team believes they avoided something serious, but at the time of recording on Monday morning, we're not sure of that severity and if he'll be ready to go week 1 or if it's something that could keep him sidelined a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Dennis Allen can still coach defense. Now, we had reservations heading into last season regarding the Saints' defensive talent, their lack of depth, and the increased age of some of those key cogs. And I know a lot of people weren't happy about how we projected the Saints defense. And if you don't adjust for schedule, you'll see a Saints defense that finished 5th in EPA, surrendered per play and 3rd in success rate. The problem with that is the Saints played the second easiest schedule of offenses. So you have to adjust for opponent. And once you adjust for that easy schedule, the Saints actually finished 15th in overall defensive efficiency. They fell out of the top 10. It's been 4 straight seasons of regression for the defense. And, the Saints' schedule, again, projected to be one of the 3 easiest. So the surface level stats and metrics will look fine when the dust settles this year, but we'll see what it looks like when you adjust for schedule. Up front, the defensive line took a step back last year, which is what we projected, and especially when getting to the quarterback. 31st in pass rush win rate, so the sack numbers were down. Cam Jordan is still a fine player, a plus player. He's just not elite anymore at 35. 10% pressure rate on pass rush snaps, just 3 sacks, the lowest since Cam's rookie year in 2011. Fortunately, better season than projected for Carl Granderson. He stepped up with 58 pressures and 9 sacks. I'm interested to see if that level of production can unfold again, because Granderson isn't really a pedigree guy as an undrafted player, and the pressure rate was just 11%. Chase Young was the splash signing at edge, 1 year, $13 million. That's all he could get because of a neck procedure that he needed to take care of in late March. Chase is an interesting player, very good, right? Finished 15th in pass rush win rate last season. However, his game took a serious step back in terms of setting the edge and tackling. 35% missed tackle rate, below replacement level setting the edge. Maybe that was because of the neck injury. But what I can tell you is, going to kind of phrase this in a manner that doesn't completely out everything. The defensive staff in San Francisco was wildly underwhelmed by Chase Young after the trade. Let's just put it that way. And I was a little surprised to hear that, but you could see it in the snap counts. 6 of his games for the 49ers, Chase played like 26 to 36 snaps. Randy Gregory was playing more than the 49ers had hoped after making the trade for Chase Young. So there was something there that the staff just wasn't in love with relative to their vision for him when they went and made that trade. Inside, I thought the play was really poor from the Saints last year. Brian Brisee at 305 pounds wasn't strong enough to hold up at the point of attack, graded at 138th out of 142 qualifying interior linemen against the run. And you can, say what you want about PFF's grades, but, they are watching every single snap more than guys on the couch. And, if he was 138th, was he 100th, was he 120th? Who knows? It just wasn't good. His best attribute was as a pressure guy, right? 5 sacks I think is a solid number as a rookie, but it came on just an 8% pressure rate. And then you had Kalen Saunders, having his best season as a pro, 22 run stops, single-digit missed tackle rate, still just a middling player. He couldn't really have a full-time starting role in Kansas City. Nathan Shepard, same situation. And that interior of the Saints line is why they finished 20th in yards allowed per rush before first contact, despite facing a bottom 5 schedule of run offenses. A lot of the veteran pieces inside came from previous stops where they were just depth pieces, and now they're being elevated to starter snaps. You mentioned Demario Davis. Apparently, he's going to be playing linebacker at an elite level until he's in the grave.
I mean, look, I want to see him out there in his mid-40s, still making tackles and still being a plus defender in coverage, because he is a modern marvel, even by standards of a game now where players that take care of themselves can continue to perform at higher levels deeper into their careers.
And the crazy part is if you looked at the first 3, 4, 5 years of his career, it's okay, he's just, a good player. He's been elite. 4.3 yards allowed per target in coverage, 48 run stops, a single-digit missed tackle rate. You mentioned the other big defensive signing for New Orleans was Willie Gay. He brings something to the Saints defense that Pete Werner can't, and it's speed and athleticism. But that's a really nice trio in the middle of the field where Dennis Allen can mix and match Gay and Werner on specific down and distance situations with Davis, right? Secondary really needs Marshawn Lattimore's health. Only 17 games played over the last 2 seasons. He's ramping up from a hip injury, should be ready week 1. But when Lattimore's on the field, still a damn good cover man. I think we believe him to be older than he is because he came right out as a rookie and he's only 28, so he's still in his prime. 6.5 yards per target allowed the last 2 seasons despite, the injuries. Paulson Adebo was the guy that made that year 3 leap. And that was desperately needed for the Saints last year. 63 passer rating allowed when targeted, improved the missed tackle rate. Only 56% of targets were caught, so that was a huge leap for Adebo. Alontae Taylor needs a similar year 3 leap of his own as the Saints nickel. He's been picked on for 2 seasons. And then you mentioned Kool-Aid. He was picked 41 in April's draft. They were going to have him contribute a good amount as a rookie. We'll see what unfolds with the knee injury. Tyrann Mathieu continues to be an all-around premium safety. He's now 32. The running mate at safety seems to be a concern. The Saints struck out on adding Justin Simmons, so it's Jonathan Abram, it's Jordan Howden. They're still battling for that starting strong safety spot beside the Honey Badger. Todd, I kind of hinted at this when we wrapped up the offense, but if the older guys like Cam Jordan and Demario Davis and Tyrann Mathieu and Marshawn Lattimore stay healthy, the Saints are going to improve on that 15th overall schedule-adjusted rating from last season. And if I trusted Derek Carr and Dennis Allen or the offensive line even a smidge more, I would have been a buyer on the Saints at their new depressed price. I mean, last season at this time, the market made the Saints a 9.5 win team. They're now a 7.5 win team with a bottom 5 schedule. A few more talented pieces in an upgraded OC, but I haven't gotten there yet.
It's all about evaluation, and some of these things are fluid, whether it's identifying these teams before the year, trying to figure out how the market prices them on a week-in, week-out basis, or tying up that hard-earned capital with some of the season-long investments. So it'll be interesting to watch the Saints, who get off with a very favorable, or I should say winnable contest in the division to start against the Panthers, and the schedule gets significantly more difficult from weeks 2 through 5, where the Saints will go to Dallas, they'll host the Eagles, they'll play at the Falcons and at the Chiefs before they get another divisional game at home for week 6. You could be talking about New Orleans just being 2-3, considering that a major boon for this team to build going forward. Last, but certainly not least in the division, it's a team that's gotten to the playoffs each of the last 2 years, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whose win total now sits at 7.5, shaded to the over, largely aided by Bet the Board listeners that piled into one of our best bets under their adjusted win total at 8.5. They're plus $1.50-ish to make the playoffs, and to win the division, their number has drifted out, making them the second favorite at a price tag north of 3-1. As far as some of the additions down there on the Gulf Coast, Sterling Shepard and Jordan Whitehead come in. Subtractions, no Shaq Barrett, Ryan Jensen, Devin White, and Carlton Davis. As far as drafting was concerned, they used first-round draft capital to bring in an offensive lineman out of Duke and Graham Barton. Chris Braswell comes in from Alabama. And when we try and encapsulate what Tampa did last season, they saw a 10 turnover adjustment year over year, experienced the third best year over year improvement with injury luck. They became the 5th team in NFL history to win a playoff game after starting 4-7 or worse, found a way to make the playoffs despite going 1-6 over a 7-game stretch from week 6 to week 12. And they actually have the worst win percentage ever in a 2-year span by a team to make the playoffs in both seasons, with the first team in league history with a 500 or worse record and 2 playoff appearances in that 2-year span. So what do, Payne? Dave Canales takes the head coaching job at Carolina that we mentioned. A familiar name, especially for college football fans, takes over at OC and Liam Cohen, and he's going to be tasked with handling Baker Mayfield, who, when you looked under the covers at what Baker was able to do, the stable quarterback metrics, not so great. He was outstanding on high variance downs, but as you've told me time and time again, those are often not nearly as predictive year over year as what you do in some of those early downs that allow you to stay ahead of the down and distance.
Listen, I don't know what you do in your personal life. I try not to look under the covers and see another man there, but you know.
You probably know a lot more about what I do in my personal life than anybody, so.
Liam Cohen gets his first crack at running an NFL offense.
I should have gone look under the hood, look under the covers. I'm distracted right now. My NASCAR race is resumed, so, covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers plays second fiddle here.
I feel like, a scene out of Seinfeld here. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
By the way, I watched that episode again the other day. It's withstood the test of time and is outstanding from top to bottom.
Yeah, it's great. And honestly, George, easily the best character there. And as you see Larry David continue to make impressive content, I'm out on Seinfeld. Some of those stand-up bits from Jerry, not very good.
So it's not quite.
You see where all the brain.
It's not the Brady Belichick argument where you can make a case for both sides. It is 100% in Larry David's corner.
1,000%. Yeah. Okay, let's kind of reel this back in here because somehow we are going over an hour in this shitfest division. Okay, so where are we going? Liam Cohen? Yes.
Liam Cohen, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. You could take it wherever you want, honestly.
He's... I don't give a
just not under the covers.
Sucks. Okay. He's from the McVay tree, right? He's bounced back and forth between the Rams and, as you mentioned, as a college guy there, Kentucky. And when you look at the stops at Kentucky, Cohen really improved Kentucky's offense at both those one-year stops. Kentucky's offense in 2021 with Cohen improved more than 60 spots in schedule-adjusted efficiency. 2022, Cohen goes back to the Rams, and then in 23 with Kentucky again, another 60-plus spot tick up. What I would anticipate Cohen bringing to Tampa this season is more 11 personnel, right? More 3 wide receiver sets, far more pre-snap motion, far more huddling. And what I'm hearing is that Cohen's going to actually give Baker 2 to 3 plays while he's in the huddle. And based on what the defensive alignment is coming out of the huddle, Baker's going to choose the best of those 2 or 3 plays he was given. Baker's going to operate under center more. Cohen's talked about wanting more diversity in the ground game, but doing it from similar formations so the Bucs don't tip their hand and keep defenses guessing because everything looks similar but is actually diverse. And there's been some comments from Bucs defensive players this camp where it's like, it's a little bit more of a college offense, keeping us on our toes a little bit more than last season. So it'll be interesting to see what this looks like. Past Tampa's new offensive scheme and feel, the reason pro bettors believe regression is coming for the Bucs is exactly what you mentioned, right? And it's specific to Baker Mayfield, and it's that most of his improvement, most of the offensive improvement, most of the team improvement overarching is in these less stable areas. The metrics that have far more variance year to year is where the Bucs really surged last year. And take nothing away from Baker. I thought he played, the best ball of his career, and give him credit for mentally building himself back up, right? I mean, he was perceived to be a first-round bust. He gets another opportunity, makes the most of it. But the vast majority of Baker's production came from explosive plays, and they came on late downs. So if you look at Baker on early downs, he was QB 27 in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation. On late downs, QB number 5. And if you just focus on Baker's accuracy, early downs, he was 42nd, 6th on late downs. And then you just look at the Buccaneers offense as a whole. Again, early downs are far more predictive. Your goal should be to bypass third downs altogether or put yourself in third down situations where the defense has to defend both run and pass. The Buccaneers offense was 29th on early downs, somehow survived, finished top 10 on third down. It just lived on explosive plays to bail them out. It was a top 5 explosive passing offense. Baker also had something that I think we addressed when Billy gave out our best bet under 8.5 wins at significantly better juice, was the extreme turnover luck that Baker had. He committed 24 turnover-worthy throws. Just 10 were picked off. Josh Allen, for example, 21 turnover-worthy throws, 18 picked off. Jalen Hurts committed 15 turnover-worthy throws. All 15 were picked. So you see how much fortune Baker had there. He also took gobs of sacks, 40 to be exact, because he held on to the ball for 2.8 seconds behind an offensive line that was 22nd in pass block win rate. Sacks are typically drive killers, but because Tampa was freakishly good on late downs and hit the explosive plays at an elite clip, the sacks Baker took weren't as detrimental as the larger sample size of data would suggest they are. Now, the camp reports have been positive regarding the Buccaneers' offensive line. Tristan Wirfs is an elite left tackle, was paid like one. Luke Gadecki handled the transition to right tackle extremely well. First-round pick, you mentioned Graham Barton, has made a seamless transition to center. Cody Mauch had a horrific rookie season, but he's added 15 pounds of good weight, and everyone's talking up his improvement. If Mauch doesn't improve, right, and the rookie Graham Barton is overwhelmed once the Bullets are live at a new position, the interior of the line could be a problem because Ben Breederson isn't really a playable guy at left guard, nearly 2,000 career snaps of well below replacement level ball, gave up a 6% pressure rate on pass blocks, pass block snaps last season. Couldn't really move anybody in the trenches. He's just kind of stayed in the league because he's versatile. I do like the weapons Baker has, right? I mean, at this point, it's death taxes and Mike Evans going for a four-figure number. Him and Baker were in lockstep right away. Evans had a 25% target share. I mentioned the explosive, so Evans averaged 2.3 yards per route run. It was the first time Evans, reached that 2 number in his prior 4 seasons. Chris Godwin, I want to tell this for our listeners. I know you have a fantasy draft coming, so it's probably not going to be great for you. Chris Godwin's moving back into the slot on a more full-time basis. Only 37% of his snaps were in the slot last year. So I would expect Godwin's slot share to be like 70% of again. He's in a contract year. Liam Cohen has come out and said, hey, we're going to use him in the Cooper Kupp role. Rookie Jalen McClellan was part of Washington's high-powered college offense with Penix and Rome and Jalen Polk. He's flashed big playability all throughout camp and should line up outside opposite of Evans in these 3 wide sets. But again, some of the metrics we know will regress are glaring. And on top of that, the Buccaneers face a top 10 schedule of pass defenses. Running back usage is going to be far more split this season. Rachaad White had 76% of all of Tampa's running back touches last year. He was an accumulator, not overly efficient. 38th in yards created, 2.5 yards after first contact. I know Tampa's O-line struggled to create push. They were 31st in run block win rate. And then Tampa, on top of that, faced a top 3 schedule of run defenses. So it's not all on White. But I really think Bucky Irving's ability to make guys miss and be shifty is very appealing in some of Liam Cohen's run concepts. Todd Bowles has hyped up Bucky throughout camp. And I think the Bucs running back room has he's got a real ability to contribute this season. And so, for me, when you're looking at a projection of a bottom 10 schedule of run defenses here, Todd, I would expect maybe a slight tick up in run production in terms of down-to-down efficiency, and I'm interested to see what Bucky looks like and how potentially that role expands as the season goes on.
Rachaad White, to your point, not only an accumulator, added value as a receiver as much as anything else from a fantasy perspective and what he was leaned on and counted on within the confines of that Tampa offense. Todd Bowles' stop unit Payne finished last year with the 7th fewest points per game allowed, 19.1. Their fewest since the 2007 season, the 2nd fewest points per game allowed in the NFL from Week 13 to Week 18, behind only the Las Vegas Raiders. Notable departures we kind of touched on at the top. Shaq Barrett, 7th most pressures in the league over the last 5 seasons. He's gone. Devin White was the first player with 500-plus tackles and 20 interceptions through 5 seasons since Brian Urlacher accomplished that feat. He's gone as well. And Carlton Davis, traded to the Detroit Lions, had the 2nd most passes defended at 69 in the NFL over the past 5 seasons. One area where this Bucs defense, though, should remain stout is along the defensive line if they're able to stay healthy there. Vita Vea, Kalia Kansi, and Yaya Diaby had been outstanding, but there are some other questions that have to be answered for this team in the linebacker room and the defensive backfield. When you look at Tampa's stop unit, what kind of realistic expectations do you put on what Todd Bowles is going to be able to do with this group?
Yeah, I think we can probably be quicker on this side for a number of reasons. We just mentioned some of the good fortune Tampa had offensively between turnover luck and positive late down variance. Very similar situation on defense, where Tampa was a bottom 10 early down defense, but top 10 in the red zone. And so that kind of camouflaged some of the deficiencies. They had loads of fumble luck. Speaking strictly to team turnovers, which I think you hinted at, the improvement between the 2022 Bucs and the 2023 Bucs was turnovers. from an EPA perspective, about a net difference of 57 expected points added year over year, and roughly 32 points is a win, so nearly 2 extra wins just on turnover luck. Field goal luck was at the high end of the spectrum for the Bucs last year as well, but you kind of see the Bucs' true team strength when it stepped up in class, 1-6 against the best teams on the schedule. There's a bit of a youth movement defensively for Tampa, and sure, you mentioned some of the big-time dudes there. Vita Vea and then obviously Levante David in the front seven are the veteran glue guys holding this together, and they're both premium players. But 19th overall pick, Kalijah Kancey, heads into year 2 looking for a tick-up, dealt with a calf injury as a rookie, got bullied at the point of attack, but did show some pass rush juice, and that was maybe the one knock on Kancey was his size playing inside. Logan Hall heads into year 3 as a second-round pick. He's been an abject disaster. Struggles against the run, only a 5% pressure rate on pass rush snaps. Year 4 for first-round pick Joe Tyron, right? Underachieved to this point relative to his draft position, but he's at least playable. You mentioned Yaya Diaby. He had a solid rookie season. I like his chances moving forward once he heals from an ankle injury. He really showed some burst and athleticism. And a lot of the testing guys thought higher of Yaya during that draft process last year. Then you have rookie Chris Braswell from Alabama. He's been trending up with each passing day of camp. So it wouldn't shock me if you said, hey, it's week 9, it's week 14, whatever it is. Diaby, once healthy, and Braswell, once he gets acclimated to more of the NFL game, take significant steps away from Hall and Tryon as the season goes on. KJ Britt will see an enhanced role at linebacker next to Levante David. Was efficient in a very small sample size last season, so there's not too much to take from that because even the prior 2 years had a very small sample size, but were on the opposite end of the efficiency spectrum in that they were not very good. Servassier Dennis, similar situation. Todd Bowles said the second-year backer has carved out a niche role for 2024. The sample size as a fifth-round rookie he played, is 100 snaps. So again, it's tough to gauge Dennis. And then you have the undrafted 2024 rookie, Kalen DeLoach from Florida State. He's in the 2 deep at linebacker. So, it's effectively Levante David and one of the kids. Levante David turns 35 in January. If he misses time, this could be a very scary situation at linebacker for the Bucs. Secondary, led by Antoine Winfield Jr., one of the best seasons ever for a safety was last year. Winfield Jr. was an elite run defender, single-digit missed tackle rate, 10 havoc plays created through the air, just a historic season for Winfield Jr. there. Jamel Dean has turned into a really nice corner that's willing to get physical with his big frame. He is coming off his worst season as a pro, but he dealt with a nagging ankle injury throughout last season. Jordan Whitehead returns to Tampa after 2 seasons with the Jets. He's an above replacement level safety. Then you have some young guys, right? Christian Eisen played over 700 snaps as a undrafted free agent last season. Showed well. I just don't know, if the pedigree correlates to a year 2 improvement or, if Izzian kind of played to his ceiling right away. Zion McCollum heads into year 3 below replacement level, his first 1,000 snaps in the league. If you are following the camp reports out of Tampa, the secondary is struggling with speed receivers. They're giving up explosives to fast receivers during these joint practices. The positive for Tampa's defense, and specifically the secondary, schedule gets easier year over year. Top 5 schedule of pass offenses last season. It dips down to average this year. Again, a little bit shorter with the Buccaneers than other previews, but I know, most know what our top line thoughts are when, Billy gave out under 8.5 a few weeks back.
Haven't been that much shorter. I thought we were going to come in and get this podcast knocked out in 26 minutes, and we're approaching similar lengths to what we've done for the previous 5 divisions. So it's the perfect time to put a bow and get to the 3/4 poll with only the Western Division still on the horizon. Encourage folks to follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, for all things Bet the Board, be sure to follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And Payne, it takes us to the best bet portion of the program. I'm glad we got it ahead of that Bucs best bet, which we would have saved for this show, but we would have had to try and give it out at a much worse price than is widely available. So I'm not sure if there's another win total, a player prop, or a different direction that we're taking our listeners on this fine Monday morning.
man, as I try to wrap this up, you're kind of taking me in all different directions. But yes, this isn't a great division. But this also isn't your typical type of content. And so every team is its own unique snowflake. And you start digging into these teams and you're just looking for an edge, right? Regardless of
100%.
how they're perceived, right? And so that's why these end up longer than ever expected, because as you're deep diving them, you're going down these wormholes, and you're probably spending somewhere in the off season between 50 hours on every team, regardless of what their varying power rating level is, and this is what it results in. And to your point there, it's like, we'd like to give out a correlated pick to the division, but had we waited, we lose out on 48 cents on the dollar going under today rather than when we gave it out. I'm going to actually throw this back to you, because we talked about a prop the last couple of days. Last night specifically, you mentioned one. It's going to be in a different division back in the AFC East. Billy, the Buffalo guy, has endorsed this. My other prop guy says the same thing. I hate overs, but we're gonna go with it. I'm gonna let you discuss this one.
Well, I feel like this is a proper homage to Billy, who jumped in for the AFC East, decided he was going to go to the NFC South to give out a best bet win total. So I feel like it's proper to do a full 360. I think that's what it is, as we come full circle and go back to the AFC East, offering up a best bet prop on who I think is going to emerge as the number one weapon in a Stephon Diggs-less, Gabe Davis-less Buffalo Bills offense, that being Dalton Kincaid. We've talked at great lengths about how we feel that Buffalo is suited to get both tight ends on the field with him and Dawson Knox. We're not sure with Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, who emerges from that wide receiver room, but Kincaid has all the peripherals, was drafted as an explosive playmaker, and I think you're going to see a lot of that show up on the stat sheet. We talk about inclement weather and needing those big targets. Kincaid flashed last year when Knox was out, and I think some of that trajectory continues. So rather than looking at some of his yardage or catch numbers, it's all about pay dirt and trying to get to the end zone. I think it's an extremely manageable number when we look at some of the other comparables that are out there for over-under on touchdown receptions. To expect Dalton Kincaid to exceed odds makers' expectations. Over 4.5, I'm seeing kind of in that minus 140, minus 150 range. Not sure if you saw anything better there, Payne, in terms of his touchdown number.
Yeah, I think 140 seems to be consensus, but it is starting to leak a little bit. And there's been some concerns with some of the other pass catchers there. MVS can't catch a cold right now.
Sprained neck to boot.
Yep, and some discussion about what we knew of Keon Coleman in terms of the route tree not being overly robust. And so I think that means more for Shakir and obviously our guy Dalton Kincaid. There's also been a discussion of more two tight end sets, which increased Josh Allen in the offense's overall efficiency when both Knox and Kincaid were on the field. So I like this from that perspective for sure. And then the other positive here, right? Everything is correlated. And so when Buffalo loses its horse on the defensive end and Matt Milano could find themselves in a little bit more of a high scoring games. And that's a positive for Dalton Kincaid as well.
You look for all those pieces to fit together. And kind of going back to what you said about the division being a little bit longer because you try and uncover angles and value, there's a good chance that a lot of these teams in the NFC South don't get discussed on Bet the Board for the remainder of the season, most notably the Carolina Panthers, who play every one of their games on Sunday. So it's not like we're covering them on Monday Night Football or Thursday Night Football. So if you're a Carolina Panthers fan, unless you guys are flirting with 8-9 wins, there's a chance this is the last time you've heard Bryce Young's name mentioned on this very podcast for the 2024 season.
Huh, wow. I'm gonna bet the no on that. I'm sure we'll talk about it.
I am sure as well. There is no doubt Carolina will show up in the good, the bad, and the ugly one Monday morning at least some point during the course of the regular season. Any final words of wisdom you'd like to share before we take a little break and come back on Thursday to wrap up the last two divisional previews that we have on the horizon?
I was going to break some balls, but I'm not going to. This is your week. College football's starting.
No.
This has gone long enough.
This is your week for college football starting, with Florida State getting center stage bright and early with a noon kickoff for you on the East Coast, 9 a.m. out here on the West Coast for their trip to Dublin. I just want to make sure that the blood pressure doesn't go through the roof if the offense doesn't get off working seamlessly under the leadership of DJU.
I am interested to see what this looks like. All of the boys are fading, right? We've seen some sharp money first half +7, some sharp money at 13.5, and we're down to 11.5 a lot of places. Here's what I'm going to say. I think the defense can be better than expectation. I believe the offense is going to show well in games where they can run the ball, and there's going to be a lot of variance because it's going to be, if you listen to the ACC preview, it's going to be a variance offense through the air. When the deep balls are hitting, it's going to look really good. It's going to be an offense that probably is tough if they have to play from behind. Fortunately, when you look at Georgia Tech, probably should be able to run the ball pretty good here. So that will be interesting. However, Wednesday, we didn't talk about this.
Nope, I was going to allow you to share
College
those
football
details.
week 0. Brad is going to be back breaking down the week 0 college football card. For those that were looking for a Notre Dame preview and didn't get one, Brad's going to go in-depth both sides of the ball. So that is what to expect on Wednesday. I would check for that potentially in the morning. And then Thursday, we're back with the AFC West preview. My boy, Patty Mahomes.
Well, I mean, this time last year, you said if the Chiefs went out and won the Super Bowl in the second straight season, given the concerns we had about the Chiefs, it might be time to cancel the season. Fortunately for NFL fans across the rest of the league, that hasn't come to pass. So we will break down the AFC West and try and make sense of the three teams looking to chase down Kansas City there. And rest assured, Payne, as we wrap this show up, starting to see a little bit of Florida State money enter the market. Some of the 11s turning into a 12.5 at one of your more prominent offshore shops as we close this very fine program. So best of luck to all of you, our loyal listeners, with whatever investments you choose to make in and around the NFC South. As Payne said, college football on Wednesday, week 0. Brad Powers will take care of things there, and we'll be back with you for the AFC West on Thursday. But most importantly, as always, with the Dalton Kincaid over touchdown receptions ticket in that portfolio, we'll see you at the window.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Bet the Board. Make sure you follow Todd and Payne on X. Todd is at Todd Fuhrman. That's TODDFUHRMAN. And Payne is at Payne Insider. That's PAYNEINSIDER. Don't forget, our weekly newsletter comes with an additional best bet. Have that delivered to your inbox by clicking the link atop the podcast show notes. And most importantly, subscribe and download Bet the Board. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Wondery, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and all your other major platforms.